Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, where everybody is. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Adjoa Osei, and I'm a clinical psychologist and yoga teacher located in New York. I am one of the planning members of the Ancestral Institute. And so thank you so much for coming today for our webinar on Black hair. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what the Ancestral Institute does, and then I'll introduce our wonderful speakers who we're so excited to have with us today. And then we'll get into some dialogue around the politics and liberation of Black hair. And so because I can't do two things at one time, I'm going to ask everyone just to think about your relationship with your hair, your journey, where you started and where you are now. And I just want you to drop a couple words in the chat that really describes your relationship with your hair now. Is it feeling powerful? Is it feeling inspiring? Are there still aspects around our hair that maybe places where we feel fear? And so just drop a few words in the chat when you think about your relationship to your hair now. And while you do that, I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint. So freedom, yes, I'm seeing freedom. Beautiful, beautiful. Any words, just keep dropping. Loving my hair. Okay, yes, yes, yes. So we already got a lot of affirming messages, which is something that we're going to talk about today. So please, please feel free to keep dropping whatever words come to mind when you think about your relationship to your hair now. Okay, so I have to do the always have to ask, can everyone see my PowerPoint? Okay. And so this is titled Our Hair Stories, the Politics and Liberation of Black Hair. Like I said, we are the Ancestral Institute, and here is our website. So please feel free to reach out to us, become pen pals, engage in dialogue with us, because that's what we really want this to be, something that's really centered in the community. And so I'm seeing here a labor of love, graying and fading, but still loving it. Yes, I'm starting to get gray hairs too, and I'm just embracing it. I'm going to go with it. Gratitude. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, these are wonderful messages that we're already hearing about our hair. And so, what is the Ancestral Institute? And so, our mission is really to be a forum where we can bring in and share our ancestral and traditional healing practices. We really want to push back on kind of Western notions of mental health that's really steeped in kind of beliefs around kind of like white supremacy. And we really want to work towards achieving treatment that is for the whole person and really thinks about what ways of healing that we've passed down. And so that's our mission as an organization. Today, if you're in the right place, hopefully you are, this is going to be a panel exploring Black hair. And thinking about that, Black hair goes beyond just the type of hairstyle that we have, but there's something really inherently political about our hair. And there, throughout time, it's been a symbol of both oppression and empowerment. And so we have a wonderful group of speakers today who are going to really share what does it mean to kind of redefine our hair stories through a lens of self-love and resistance. And so let's see what else. Ooh, mine is still salt and pepper locks. Okay. I think I'm getting there. We're going to see. My hair is kind of short, so you can't see it, but I'm going to go with it. And so our first panelist, Henrietta Bagazonzya, is a multidisciplinary artist. She really does a wonderful showcase incorporating both drag and burlesque to really show self-exploration around Black culture. Please, please write this down. She has an upcoming show called Hairology. I am going to be there. So when that date comes up, please, please keep it in mind. It's a wonderful work, really challenging, again, these messages that we've learned around our hair. Next up, we have Monique Duncan, who we had a wonderful conversation talking about Black hair, which was really inspired by her book, Freedom Braids, which is such a beautiful tale, really exploring the history of Black hair throughout time and thinking about kind of how do we pass down our cultural traditions. She's an author, she's an educator, and she's a researcher. And her book was really one of the inspirations for this topic. So I'm so thankful that she agreed to be with us here today. Michele Irving. I call her Mama Michele, which I hope is okay. She is also on our planning team. She's been such a beautiful source of inspiration. If you were at our last webinar, I had chills when she was speaking. She has been doing amazing community work and advocating for women through her POWA organization, which really pushes back on gender-based violence and gender discrimination. So Mama Michele, thank you so much for joining us again. And last but not least, Danielle. Thank you so much for being here. I've known Danielle for a very long time. She's a clinical psychologist and consultant and really works on kind of fostering growth and empowerment. She's worked in a variety of centers like college counseling, hospitals, and community clinics. She also has a wonderful YouTube series. Please look out for it on YouTube. Also look out for on Instagram, Conversations on the Couch, which is just addressing a range of mental health topics. So please look out for her work. So that's wonderful. Lovely list of speakers. Thank you again. Please give them some virtual applause for joining us. And let's really get into the topic. And so I wanted to kind of just open up with a really kind of broad question, because when we talk about Black hair, we're really going beyond kind of these cosmetic attributes, right? It's kind of beyond just like what our hair looks like, what style should be wearing. But in many ways, Black hair is inherently political. And so I just wonder if each of you could just speak to why you think kind of Black hair is inherently political. And so whoever wants to jump in, go right ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Henrietta Bagazonzya. Thank you so much for the introduction. I can speak from my perspective as an African woman living in New York City and my growing in Africa. I actually didn't have natural hair until 27, over 13 years ago. And I was already in America at the time. But I found a correlation between being presentable was very much even more so deeply rooted within African families, more so than it was here. And that was surprising to me. And my decision to change my hair, or the people in my family who have changed, from perming their hair to look more straight, to look more European, the reasons have varied, but for all of us, it's all deeply rooted in how we feel about ourselves, how we represent ourselves. And it's political in that we are showcasing our heritage, our culture, our presence. I cannot help how the hair grows out of my head. So it is interesting to have been in an environment where it was discouraged to even have natural hair, and to come to America and see the natural hair movement, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And as we all know, in the 1950s and the 60s, Black liberation movements really attributed loving yourself, loving your hair, loving the Afro. The Afro was a symbol of pride, a symbol of Black power, Black resilience. And that's how I feel it has resonated for me and a lot of the people that I have worked with, including other performance artists and, as I said, some family members. But it's a shame because I think in Africa, for example, we are the highest consumers of products that change our hair to look straight. The highest consumers in the entire world is Africa, nowhere else in the world. And why is that? Is this indoctrined idea that you have to be more European to be more acceptable. And so, yes, my hair, when I wear it like this, I know that I will get compliments. I'll also get insults. It happens 50-50. But I think for me, I have pride in how I look and pride in how I wear it. It's not my business how anyone else feels about it, but that is a personal journey, I think, for everybody. But for me, it's definitely a political path.
Thank you so much, Henrietta, just highlighting that, like how it kind of reflects our heritage, right? And this idea that somehow the hair that grows out of our head is not presentable, right? Or not professional. I wonder if there's anyone else that can relate to that or offer like an additional perspective around why you think Black hair is political.
I would like to go. Of course, to me, it is rooted in racism and Black inferiority as a justification for enslavement and as a justification for stripping you of your identity. If you cannot be who you are as your whole self and have to appear differently to suit the master's eye, then obviously that's a symbol of oppression. And so I am on this panel for the specific support or reason to think about why this is, and especially in the context I like hearing my sister talking about coming from Africa, being in America, and then I want to talk about Belize because now for us it would appear, it would look like we were a black country, it would seem, but like I guess in Africa, for example, our experience have been, and I will use the words of my son, Imhotep Aikwe Lumumba. And this he wrote this letter the 26th of August 2016. And he says, "My name is Imhotep Aikwe Lumumba, and I am 13 years old. I have not shaved or cut my hair in my lifetime, and I feel that I should not be forced to cut my locks in order to receive a good education. My locks are an extension of myself and an expression of my spirituality and cultural beliefs, which are based on Pan-Africanism and the Rastafarianism. Pan-Africanism and Rastafarianism teaches us to respect and love the contribution of our African ancestors to world civilization. My locks are a representation of my faith and myself as a person. And so I really don't want to cut my hair. I was frustrated and sad because I was singled out and removed from class because of my locks. I missed the day's lesson because I was called to the principal's office. I am really looking forward to learning and making friends, but all of that was taken away from me because of my hair. Something I love and take pride in. And I wanted to share that with you. And this came to me today because I kind of work with the spirits, and so the spirits were busy, and I was to do this. I don't know how long, but the spirit says, you should find this today, and it almost brought me to tears because of the words of a 13-year-old child, and to me, his expression really says to the environment that he was brought up in. He was brought up in an environment, obviously, to have pride in his African heritage. And you could hear his name. Obviously, it speaks of Africa throughout. And so, uh, and he fearlessly defended his appearance because he wanted for everyone, when they see him, they see Africa. They see this is my ancestors, this is who I am. And it has even reached it. Well, there's much more to the story, but I just wanted to start it out. I'll continue. But it even reached to the point when I told him I'm his mom. I said, son, if it's too much, you could cut your hair. I say, we won't feel anyway because you have to go through this journey. If you feel to fit in, to go along, to get along, because he said he was sad, he can't be with his friends, everything, you could cut your hair. He said, no, mom, I will not cut my hair because I knew that I had to go through this ever since I was in standard 3. And he must have been about maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9 when he would have been in standard 3. So obviously he's a youth that understood some of the resistance that needs to be out there, and so I think he sacrificed himself for that.
I actually wanted to add to what you were saying there because, as someone who writes for a younger audience and teaches younger children, as Black people throughout history, we've constantly had to, what you said, kind of defend our rights to wear our hair a certain way. Our hair is always a topic of discussion. And, as an educator of young children, I'm really focused on teaching kids about how our hair upholds legacies and rituals and that carry generations of cultural traditions. It's not a coincidence that you look around the room and a number of students are wearing cornrows or box braids or Senegalese twists. And so, knowing that history is definitely something that is empowering for young kids. And yet, our hair has been taunted, ridiculed, as it was mentioned before, shaven off in an effort to erase our identity. And so when I think of our hair being political because of the race-based discrimination that we faced, it also is a statement for us in terms of freedom, right? And one of the things that I really get into the history about is how our hair has actually been used as a tool to liberate us. And that's something that, you can think about it a number of ways. Literally, it has been used as liberation tools where braided styles were codes that were used as messages to liberate enslaved people, but also it liberates us because we are not succumbing to Eurocentric views of beauty and wearing our hair how we want to wear it and how it naturally comes out of our head, or in the different styles and traditions that we've experienced growing up is our freedom. And so I think about the dichotomy of Black hair. Adjoa, you mentioned earlier how in one state it has been, a symbol of oppression, but in another lens, it is also a symbol of empowerment. So I think of that dichotomy as well, and I think about how, as a Black woman, it represents freedom to me.
Beautiful, beautiful. Response is really highlighting that dichotomy, and I just dropped in the chat. It starts so early, right? So early, I imagine all of us can think of messages of hair, discrimination, and just even when we think about the other parts or aspects as well. I think I might have been like 4 or 5 and came home and said white is better to my mother, right? So it starts so early, that messaging. Anyone else have additional thoughts? We've heard about it as liberation. We've heard about it passing down heritage. We've talked about discrimination. Anyone else have like additional thoughts around this idea of Black hair being inherently political?
Yeah, I'll share a quick thought. In preparation for this panel, I think what I was struck by was just how comprehensive the devaluation of Black folks was, right? So from hair, right? Just your hair is nappy, it's unmanageable, it's not presentable, it's ugly, right? Just this indoctrination. I think Henrietta used that word earlier, that the hair that grows naturally is not good enough, right? And it is perhaps at the opposite spectrum of whiteness, right? As far away from whiteness as you can get. So obviously that means that you're less than. The stripping of culture, right? The stripping of religion and beliefs, the breaking of families and family ties and bonds through enslavement. I think that Black hair is political because it was made that way. Not only here, because it meant things in Africa as well, right? But certainly I think that the way that is transformed through chattel slavery, just a part of this larger system of just devaluing people on every single level. And I think what truly grinds my gear about some of the things that I see today, right, in this reclamation of our hair and our love for our hair and what it means. And I think it was never really lost, right, to the point of Monique in using it to like create maps and codes and send messages, right? And sometimes I've heard like they put rice grains in the hair, right, to save for food, right? So it has always had magic and power. And even though there were so many attempts to devalue it and diminish it, we were still holding on to it, right? In some form or fashion. And I see people getting braids now, right? You know, and the edges, right? And calling it sticky bangs, right? So just like the things that were on Black people, awful, disgusting. You don't want any part of this. You get the perm, get the relaxer, you know, get the weave and all the things are being usurped as, oh, look at this new trend that we have created. And I think that now, at least in my opinion, we are seeing through that, right? And seeing it for what it is. And I think there's a stronger sense of kind of holding on to our hair, and what we do with it is our choice, right? And not listening to the rhetoric that the way that we look and the way that we present ourselves in our hair, whether it's through the weaves or the wigs or the cornrows, the bantu knots, the locks, whatever it is our choice, and we have the freedom and the right to do it without censure, right? But I do believe that there's still many attempts to devalue us in that regard. So it's been truly a pleasure to see us engaging in that reclamation time and time again, because it has been cyclical, right, where there have been ebbs and flows of it. But I feel like we're in a time of really, really honing in on the power of it. Yeah.
Thank you, Danielle, and also just highlighting the ways in which we've kind of reclaimed and pushed back. And then just also highlighting that beyond kind of whatever style that we choose, it being kind of our choice, and really kind of turning down that outside volume of oppression and really being able to bring up that internal voice and what is it that feels authentic and true for us. And so we started to speak about this, but I wonder if we could expand more when we think about the ways in which Black hair has been discriminated against. Like, what type of acts are coming to mind, whether these are things that are historical or from your own personal experiences. And when you think about these acts of discrimination, sorry, this is a two-parter, I'll repeat it. When you think about these acts of discrimination, just how these moments informed your own views around your hair. And so what are some acts of discrimination that come to mind, whether historical or personal, and how do you feel like this has informed your own views when it comes to your relationship with your hair? I hope that was clear.
I feel that and the first thing you said, your relationship with your hair, the first thing that came to my mind was freedom. I felt that when, like most people spoke after the perm and the whatever it was, so that it could be straight, and thinking that your hair was like, I mean, at that time, even your parents would tell you, oh, your hair is so nappy. Like, it's like the cruffiest thing you could ever think about. Like, so it was, you feel really, you hated it. To be honest, you hated it because you didn't feel any kind of love for it, because everything that you were told about your hair was kind of negative. It was tough. And I think that when I finally became free, I always one of my hero prophets, human rights defender, great person was Bob Marley, and I feel that he has done so much through his music and through his words to liberate me. And of course the liberation came, first thing that came was with the hair, while going through, having that conscious, we say in our terms, that consciousness, and being able to then do away with all the things that straighten the hair and everything and just embrace their hair naturally and started to grow my locks. As a matter of fact, I grew my locks for a number of years. And it was quite, you never think that people could get in your business so much until you start to grow your locks. I mean, it was like, this, and someone said just now on the panel, it's 50-50, and kind of it was true because 50% of the people look at me and say, oh, she's growing her locks. I could grow my locks too. And 50% was like, man, we're wrong with she, well, I will go into my patois. I hope you guys bear with me a little. What's wrong with her? It was like the worst thing, especially at that time, because this was like, I guess like about 30 years ago. She won't get a job, things like that people was actually saying. And well, I got a job if I wanted a job. First, I didn't want a job, and then I needed a job, so I got a job with Deluxe. And then it actually with my same son who has his locks, and I think Obari talked about shaving us off his locks as a atonement, so to speak. And I did shave mine as an atonement for him because we had a difficult birth and I was not going to make it. My sister in his hair who walked with me through that journey, and he wasn't going to make it, and it was something I thought that would have been a sacrifice so that he could make it, and he did. He did. And I remember calling his dad and say, "Come now, because I don't know if you'll get to see him." And so he made it. We made it, and I felt, to be honest, I felt that if he was forced to cut his hair, that I would lose him. I feel that he could cut his hair, but I think that's when he made a choice to deal with his own rebirthing or reclaiming and things like that, but not being forced by what we call Babylon system. Yes. And so I don't think that these system realize how destructive they are to our people, and how, since 1492 to now, we're still paying the costs, and they still find every single way to keep ensuring that, we are held down. And each time they try to keep us underwater, we bubble up, and we come back up, and we come back up, and like we're this menace that they just can't get rid of, like, ants that in the yard that you keep trying to get rid of, and they keep coming up every summer. Every time it get hot, they're there again, and biting at you, letting you remember that we're here, we're humans, and we deserve every right. We are deserving of everything because we're deserving people. And so I think discrimination really strikes at the heart, and any type of discrimination, including discrimination, hair discrimination, skin discrimination, clothing discrimination, ethnic groups, whatever type of discrimination is so difficult. And that's why we talk about discrimination and mental health, because it really creates trauma and fear, and a lot of that is then internalized. And I think that sometimes when we see different behaviors, and even sometimes our youth not being accepted, and sometimes being very violent and very demeaning to each other, it's because, they don't look in the mirror and know that they're loved and they're free and they're able to be who they want to be, just because they are a human being. And so I we to me, I think that the symbolism as it relates to to hair, even locks. I think Obari spoke about it, like the locks, and how each time it is usurped, each time we find a tool of liberation, if the afro, finally everybody got afro. Okay, how straight your hair was, they find a way to make it curly so it looked like you had afro. And the same thing with locks. Okay, how straight the hair is, they put everything in it. Ours would grow locks naturally. We don't have to really do anything to it. It just goes that way after a while. And so I feel that the discrimination and the effects, the trauma, it's you can't understand. I remember going in front of the school board to defend my son's wanting to go, and this is Barry, we can't take him to no other school. Like, we're in a rural area, that's the school. So it's not like I had a choice to say, well, we could go here or go there. I just wanted you to know. And we shouldn't even be exploring the choice. And I remember talking to these sets of idiots about our beliefs, about, our traditions, and they had absolutely no empathy, no love for a child, none. They are so heartless. And I begin to realize that, bureaucracies or people who are in certain position, even if they look like everyone here, they're not like everyone here, because their heart expressed that of the oppressor.
Thank you, Mama Michele. Just, my heart was just breaking listening, because it just make me think of how deep, right? How deep that hurt, how much it can cut, especially when they don't realize that it's just beyond, this is not a style. It has meaning to us, as you spoke about with the difficult birth of your son, just the meaning that's so tied to it. And so how painful it is to have that be reduced, to what they think is acceptable or not acceptable. So thank you so much for your vulnerability in sharing that. I wonder if anybody else had thoughts as well of acts of discrimination that come to mind, and how you feel like it's contributed to your hair story.
I just wanted to add to what Miss Michele was telling us about her experience with her son, and the fact that I've had similar experiences with family members. I had a family member who had to cut off her dreadlocks. In order to get the promotion, she had to cut off her dreadlocks. So she chose not to, and she moved back to Africa. This was almost 15 years ago. But, I think the discrimination we face, including myself, I'm a chef when I'm not doing performance art. Sometimes I'm not in the kitchen at all. I'm just supervising and directing, and I'm still required to wear a hairnet when there's no food involved. And the same is not afforded to my white counterparts. I always wonder why they're not working anywhere around food. Why they're not wearing a hairnet as well? And this is something that other chefs who have natural hair like me have experienced. It's something I've experienced here, working as a performance artist. Sometimes people will not book you just based on what your hair looks like. So oftentimes we will perform in wigs. But also, speaking to what we're talking about with hair discrimination and being ignored or reprimanded because of your hair, we forget that some of us forget, most of us forget that hair discrimination really started in the 15th and 16th century during the transatlantic slave trade. As soon as the slave boat would reach the Americas, the first thing they would do is make everyone shave their hair off. And this was symbolic. This was meant to strip you of your identity. It was meant to make you feel like you're nothing. And we forget that even our hair was used as a commodity at one point when white people didn't want to use their cotton to stuff their couches. You can go to some estates to this day and find furniture with hair like mine. I mean, our hair is being co-opted by these people in a way that is meant to benefit them and to make us feel, at least I know for me, it made me feel like I wasn't worthy of having my hair look like this, and especially if every single family member was telling me, you won't get a job or you will not retain a job based on the way you look. So these biases that other people that look like us have It's deeply rooted in things they've heard, things that have just been passed on generationally, and it's the world over. It's not just in Africa, it's not just in America, it's everywhere. The entire world is experiencing this within the Black diaspora. And I think for me personally, it's why the project that I do, Hairology, is so important, is to showcase that we cannot make anybody happy. Even if I was to straighten my hair, you'll find something about me that is inherently not appealing to you as a Black person. So everything, as everyone has expressed here, Miss Danielle, Miss Michele, Obari, Monique, and everyone else, it's all deeply rooted in racism. You can find almost every discriminatory ideology is rooted in whiteness. And, like white is right. I remember hearing about the paper bag test when I moved to America, and I was confused. And we have something similar in Africa. So it's sort of, it just feels like all these stories are so intertwined in one way or the other. But instead of us coming together in a way that is in solidarity, it takes, you know, legislature, and it takes people trying to make sure we're not discriminated against to get to that point. But I think it should start in the home. And I think Miss Michele has done a wonderful job of instilling in her son pride in his hair, which is also what I'm trying to do with my child, which is what I heard Obari has done with his sons. And I think for a lot of us, we didn't experience that. I know I didn't. I did not experience nurturing to love my hair as a child. I cut my hair at 27 years old, and I'll never forget it. My mother cried. She cried because she couldn't believe I was choosing a natural hair path, but that was my path. But I think for a lot of us culturally, it means being ostracized in your communities. It means not being able to be part of your community in whatever way it is. And so most people will conform to those ideologies for the comfort of still being part of their communities that stand, wanting to look the way you look freely.
This is really highlighting the global aspects, right, of anti-Blackness, when we're talking about, hair discrimination, and also how it intersects with colorism and other forms of oppression. And we also hope to talk about, as we can see, the ways we're also instilling empowering messages. So everybody's journey might also include that as well. But thank you for really highlighting kind of that global aspect.
We have to change the narrative in that it's not so much internalized racism that we now are passing on that, because when we talk about white supremacy and dominance and colonialism, these colonial structures are global. We know that the Europeans colonized, the white colonized, and not so white people, right? And so are all different shades of Blackness, including Africa, Latin America, Caribbean, wherever we were. The indigenous populations as well, let us remember. But I think that sometimes for protection and for survival, we have ourselves internalized some of the master's will, right? Because we just wanted to make sure we survive. Parents wanted to make sure that their children wasn't shot in the street being thought of as a criminal just because. But again, we know now you can't, well, we see the skins bleaching as well, because I was going to say, you're black when you show up, you will be black. No matter if your hair would be straight, you will just be black with your hair straight, right? You will just be black with your hair cut. In terms of the Harvard school, for example, or Howard school. So I think that after a while, though, as the conversation go on, and as we continue, and that's why I love Rastafarianism, because I mean, these guys were so brave. They were like, you know what? Our God is black. Haile Selassie, he is black. He's from Africa. He's a king in Africa. And so they just really made sure that they took every single thing and made it black because we are black. And so, oh, our hair is your problem. How you like this one? Long, 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 10 feet of hair. And so they like turn everything on their heads. And when we think about, one of my mantra is, Bob Marley says, grow your dreadlocks. Don't be afraid of the wolf pack. And the wolf pack could be in your family. The pack could be external to your family, but many times your family members are just afraid of your safety because people were literally killed because of how they showed up.
I wanted to kind of comment on, thinking of being a child and not having a choice. In many of our stories, we never had a choice on how our hair was styled. I just remembered the hot comb that was part of the routine in the single digits. Sundays, hair was straight, hot comb. And I remember getting burned, and that was just part of the process. And then I graduated from the hot comb to getting a perm, still getting burned because the chemicals on my scalp burned my scalp. And, thinking about that space and time when we as individuals kind of had to really reckon with that internalized oppression that was carried down to us, Danielle spoke earlier about a choice and having that choice regardless of however you wanted to wear your hair. We didn't have a choice. And so I remember that moment when I decided, you know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. It's my choice how I want to wear my hair, regardless of what someone has to say in my family, what someone has to say at work, what someone has to say, outside of me. And so, I think about that because, discrimination is very overt, but I also think of, you know, just those subtle messages that have been carried down over and over from people who look like us, from people who we love. And it can be very, very hard as a child to, like we said, we didn't really have these messages of this self-acceptance when we were younger. And that's one of the main reasons why I write for children, because you see it, right? Like I've had students who, when their hair is in their natural state, it's their one way. If they have a weave or a ponytail or whatever, they're another way. And so, having them really think about why do you feel this way with that? And that shouldn't take away, you're still the same person. That shouldn't take away from who you are. And so, hair is resistance, thinking about personal freedom, thinking about my choices, um, as an adult, and how this dialogue is so important for our younger audiences so that they can start to feel a certain level of empowerment, a certain level of agency and autonomy over how they want to represent themselves in the world. So I just wanted to add that piece as well.
Yeah, and the thought of hair, as resistance. And I think this conversation is really how complex it is, because we have these external systems of oppression like white supremacy culture, and then we also have the own internalized, hair discrimination that we're passing down, or even in ways that maybe we're doing this as something protective, right? I remember when I was working in a hospital, and the staff I was working with was predominantly white, and my barber was always like, you should get a design shaved on the side of your head. Get a design. I'm like, I can't be showing up, in this space. It's like, I'll have a design shaved on the side of my head. But then why all of a sudden I worked into a different agency where I called them my African aunties and uncles, which was predominantly people of color, I suddenly felt like it was okay. It suddenly felt like I can wear this and it's not going to be an issue, and feeling like I could really kind of show up as my full self. So it's really highlighting, there's like the external factors and also the internal factors around hair discrimination. Mm-hmm. Had anyone else had other examples that they wanted to share that they noticed has contributed to their own hair journey?
Well, I just quickly wanted to talk about when I did the big chop. That was in 2014. And at the time, I was in my doctoral program and applying for externships. And it didn't occur to me that this was going to be a big deal, but I do recall someone saying, well, are you worried now that you might not get an externship because you've got this little baby fro going on? And I was like, well, no, I wasn't before, but now I am, right? So I think that for me, I think my hair was permed when I was 4 years old, right? And not because, well, I can't speak for my mom's reasoning, although this is what she's told me, that it was more about convenience and the fact that I was so tender-headed that I cried to her annoyance. So she permed it to make things easier for her. And of course, that just kind of carried on until 2014, and that was like what I knew. Um, but I think that it's, to the points that have been named thus far, there's discrimination even in the natural hair community, right? Around who's got the 4C hair and whose hair there's still this thing about length, right? And the shrinkage and whose shrinkage doesn't show up that much. So it's like, while there is still like a security and a love in being natural, there's also still some lack of safety, right, in it as well. So it's not just external. I think this maybe might have been Bari's point, but it's not just external in Eurocentric or other communities, but certainly in our own too. And I think figuring out how to just be with what we have and knowing that all different curl types and patterns and styles are important. And knowing that, regardless of how your hair looks, there is going to be a way to be discriminated against, right? This is just one of the mechanisms by which it happens. And unfortunately, there's still, some preference given to certain hair types, the way that, people present themselves based on whether there's a shave pattern or whether, your hair is like a platinum blonde or something, right? Like it depends, and there is a narrative that is attached to it. And I think that still kind of boxes us into ways of kind of conforming. And while I understand it's important to be free and to have a choice, we also have to still live in this system, right? And figuring out a way to kind of wear the mask where we can play the game and get the resources and do the things that we need to do while still kind of holding on to our identities and authentic selves, I think is a role that not many Eurocentric people have to deal with and or think about in the same ways that Black people or people of color might have to. So, yeah.
Yes, and highlighting on so many, levels. We're talking about hair today, but so many other things have come up as well when we've talked about colorism, when we've talked about how we dress. And there was a great comment in the chat about this kind of double bind of showing up as our authentic self, but also trying to do things to save our life or be protective. Michele, you looked like you wanted to share.
Yes, I just wanted to add that that's the dichotomy that we live in. But I think that our our goal, or we strive for freedom. I mean, we are who we are, and I think that finally you have to say whatever they have to come at, like with the job for me, I got the job with my locks on my butt. They were long all the way down there. And I got the job because I'm 16 times as good as anybody else who they think they could hire. And so they had to put up with me and my locks and my bright color African print clothes and outrageous jewelry, copper jewelry and bronze jewelry and silver jewelry. And so I think after a while, you just have to choose. And I think sometimes people find, oh, well, I won't make enough money. I will be homeless if I choose. People find different things to and to stop themselves from making that choice. And I think I always like Imhotep did. He said, "No, ma, I will not do that. I will not do that." And he's safely in his continuing his educational journey. And um as his mother, I said, well, it's like if he was to go to Howard School of Business, if that's what he wanted to do, then we would have battled it out in court. I told him, okay, this is what they want, then I'll see you in court. Wrote them a letter and say, this is what will happen, because he is going to that school. That's where he will be going with his locks. And I told the principal that, and she was like, I don't know what she thought. Or I said, this will cost you and your school quite a bit of money, because I am going to litigate it. Of course, at that time I was broke as skunk. I was broke. I didn't have 2 pennies. I didn't know how I was going to litigate it, but the will of a mother is tremendous, and her network. I remember sitting there. I don't know if Ifa is still on the call, but I remember sitting there by myself, and I called Ifa. I said, this will not turn out good, because the meeting was not ending the time when I thought it would have been ending if he was going to go in school. I said, but I will take this the whole way. And I did. I did everything. I went to see, you know, I was going to burn down that school if I had to. If he was not going to go there, no other child was going to go there. And believe you me, there was several bomb threats. It wasn't my doing though, but there was several bomb threats during that time, because he was out of school for 70 days. But I willed it. If he wasn't going to be there, then, and sometimes I had to be at work. I used to have to call my sister in. We used to have she used to have to go and give support. We had a taxi driver. He used to take us back and forth, because his dad went every single day and sat at that school ground. He went there every day and sat with his child. They kick him out of class. His dad picked him up and brought him home and whatever. But he went there for 70 days. And so the sacrifice, and knowing that, what our ancestors had to go through is nothing. And we will feel a little bit of economic pain, or a little bit of pain will be such. I remember going to see a lawyer. I only had $50 and bun that I made, homemade bun. And I took my bun water, and I asked a friend to please pick me up from the bus and take me, because I didn't have money for transportation. I only had the money for the bus fare from my village, well, town we call it, but it's like a village, to the city to get an attorney. And I explained to her, and she took my case, how you call it, like pro bono, that we would pay afterwards, right? And so she was able to file, and my son was able to get up in Supreme Court. Imagine a 13-year-old have to stand up in Supreme Court and answer for his locks. And so I think that sometimes we get a bit too comfortable, and we are not willing to do whatever. It wasn't that, we had, I remember asking teachers to kindly how you call it, tutor him, because he wasn't in school. And all the teachers, they refused to tutor him except one that was very, very far away. I think he only need tutoring in math, because his dad is no English. He's very, very literate in that. So, but he only need math. I don't think we have no math head in the family. Well, I know to balance my checkbook, so that's all I need in math, as far as I'm concerned. So, well, even that sometimes is a bit off, but hey, you know what I mean. So, but the point of the whole story is that we have to, in some point in time, stand up for ourselves, keep standing up for ourselves, even though, like, my sister was talking just now about the 4C curls. And I just think, like, when they said natural hair, like, you have to go to the beauty supply store and spend like $600 to control your natural hair, I mean, that's the way. So it's again, it's about money. It's about money. It's not about just rubbing coconut oil. We just use coconut oil and aloe vera and nopal to wash or relax. It's not about that at all. It's all about these fancy things that you need because you're just not good enough. So now it's about products. You have to buy all these products. So I think that at the end of the day, though, it's a lesson, and I think that we should be. And I love working with the children, Monique talk about the kids because they receive a blunt of it, I'm telling you, and even sometimes from the youngest one. Now you see them it's with the braids. Huh? I have grandkids, and sometimes they show up with the braids, and their dad would be cursing out, well, mother and father, but whatever, and he would be cursing all over. And he, because the children's mother put in the braids, and of course we are from a household that is raga, we don't deal with that. And so, and then she says, the little girl says, and grandma, it is the cheapest kind of braids. And so it's hurting my head, it's burning my head. And it's sad to see that that's what now families are feel that they're forced to because of quote unquote being able to control the hair and using that as a I say excuse because at the end of the day I raised my children and they went to school how they went to school. My little girl didn't have any bubbles in her hair, didn't no plastic, no kind of plastic in her hair. It was just a little twist. One spell, she was sick. We had to shave her hair. She went through that. Now she's with her locks. She's still in school. So I think we live our lives as an example as to what we want. And me, myself, from the time I didn't have my locks to now, there has been 1,000 different style I will show up in, and I don't care, good, bad, or ugly, it's me.
Powerful, powerful words, powerful words. Just speaking to the will that it takes, the resources and community. Something we haven't even tapped into thinking about, community, what it means to really be empowering ourselves in community. And I did want to point out, Aoife said in the chat, they had the fuel and the fire.
I know she must have been a part of it, but I think we work in separate cells.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we have about 20 minutes left. So I just wanted to throw a couple things in there, and people can feel free if you have a question at this point to drop in the chat, and I'll try to include it. But I wanted to come to this idea around kind of hair rituals. I was just thinking about the kind of importance of hair rituals, that there's something for me that feels so cared for and healed every time that I go and see my barber Rick, like every 2 weeks. That's such an important ritual. Or even when I was younger, the act of having my hair being braided by a family friend felt like an important ritual. So I wanted to ask if people could speak to important rituals that they've either experienced or are passing down to their children. And then also this idea of kind of what does it look like to define our hair through the lens of self-love and resistance. So either speaking to hair rituals that have been passed down or thinking about kind of what does it look like to define our hair through the lens of self-love and resistance.
Well, Obari tapped into something that I was thinking about early on about the intimacy of having someone do your hair. And I just remember being young and my mother, doing my hair. When I was very young, she would braid it or put it in Bantu knots, and that was our ritual. And, as a very young child, I just thought that that was something between my mother and I. But as I looked around, I saw other children who had similar styles. And I, later was able to see that it was really a shared experience. And the ritual of, you know, as a child, I didn't really like getting my hair braided. It hurt. I had to keep my head straight and still. Um, but when I look back, it was a very intimate time between my mother and I. And now going to get my hair braided or styled, you don't just have anyone do your hair. It's that intimate process again. And it's a communal process. It's a process of sharing stories. It's a process. It's, or not sharing stories, sitting in silence. It's an unspoken language, a dance. Um, and it's something that I can appreciate and look back and notice parallels between, the closest person to me doing my hair to now, my hairdresser who I've been going to for the past 15 years and seeing that same intimacy in parallel. So I just wanted to touch upon that intimacy that getting your hair done or styled creates. And that is something that is a ritual in my life to this day, that has been a ritual that our ancestors have had. And I think making that connection also for me is it allows me to connect to another place in time in a deep way. You know, like we talked about how this is beyond the aesthetic, this is beyond just a look. This is something that is deeply embedded in who we are and in our identity. So, you know, the ritual of hair braiding, of getting our hair styled, that intimacy, I think is something that is integral to who I am. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I think that we're always mindful about who does our hair. I think we feel that we have to kind of have a kind of spiritual connection, to be honest, with who. And I think sometimes we have some like some superstitions around it, like we say who some people hands hat and they don't grow your hair. Or some people bring, well, for us, they would say they bring bad vibes, you know, their aura is not too clean or whatever. And then sometimes you have to think, because when you're in the chair, to me, you're very vulnerable, and you tend to talk a bit freely, you know, your feelings or whatever is going on with you or around you or in your community tend to come out. So you want someone that is kind of confidential, to make sure that if you say things that, you know, need to be guarded, that they will be there with you. And I think I have had, sometimes I'm in the barber chair, like Adjoa, and there's different conversation, I think, that I would have with men than with women who would be doing my hair. And I think one of the cross-cutting theme though would be some of the, I like to call it my political talk, no, about what is going on politically, who is doing well in the community, who is not, who is, you know, making sure things are happening, you know, growth is happening and that kind of thing. So I think those things that happen at the either the beauty shop or the barber shop in especially Black communities. And I just wanted to add, just before I forget, we also used to do work as it relates to HIV prevention in the barber shops or in the beauty shops, to talk about condom usage, to talk about where to go to for testing, to talk about non-discrimination as it relates to, you know, um, people that may be HIV positive. So I think those are centers of cultural activities. I would say cultural and political activities, as well as spiritual space. So it is quite important for us in the Black community. And even if they're not family, they are we see them as a part of who we are, and we give them great trust. So, you know, after our mothers, for example, doing our hair, then we find someone to kind of replicate that feeling about us, you know. And so I feel that that also have to be kept up and even amplified a bit, especially as it relates to some of the change in thinking and the political ideas about who we are, and the spiritual space about who we are. So those are very important cultural and spiritual centers in our communities.
Yes, Mama Michelle, thank you for highlighting the vulnerability and then also the spiritual and the communal aspect of kind of coming together. There are so many things I've learned in the barbershop. Some I could speak here, some I can't. But being in that space is really important to me. I noticed Obari and Henrietta, you both had wanted to share something.
Thank you. Well, for me, I have, like I said, my journey into loving my hair happened well into my adulthood, because again, in Africa, in most African countries, girls are required to shave their heads. All of us, when you're in primary school and secondary school, which is, I guess, grade school and middle school here in high school. So my head was always shaved, but when it wasn't shaved, it was permed. And so the rituals that I have now are rituals that I learned along the way on my own. And I'm trying to implement them with my 11-year-old daughter, which is proving to be it's both a learning process for both of us. I did not enjoy my hair being hot combed when I was a kid. I did not enjoy my hair being braided as a kid, and I did not enjoy anyone touching my head, which is why I haven't been to a hair salon in 23 years. The last time I was in a hair salon, I was 20 years old. So I do my own hair. I started doing my sister's hair, and in fact, when I moved to America, I was an apprentice at a hair salon, and I worked in Harlem in one of those when renting chairs was still cheap, like $125 a week. Now I think it's like $300. But I used to rent a chair and I used to braid people for money. So I didn't have the same love for it. For me, it was more of a necessity. I needed to braid hair to make money, to go to school, to afford rent, to do all these things. But into my late 20s, early 30s, I started to realize that, again, having been told straight hair is the best hair to have, I was fooling myself. My hair was falling off. I had bald patches everywhere. And like I said, when I first cut off my hair, my mother cried. She said something along the lines of, "You look like you've just gotten off the boat," or something of the sort. And it was meant to be an insult, but I was determined to have love for my hair. And now, actually, most of my entire family now, all of them have natural hair, including my mother, who wore wigs and did all sorts of things to her head throughout my childhood. So I don't want my child to have that negative experience that I had with my hair growing up. It's why I don't go to the hair salon. I do not, I still, it's almost a bit of a trauma bond with somebody touching my head. I have to do it myself. Usually, if I go to the hair salon, within a day, I've redone their hairstyle. But like I said, I've not been to one in 20 something years. But I wanted to speak to how that ritual is also healing for me. Like my daughter sometimes doesn't understand when I'm emotional doing her hair, but it's because I didn't have that experience. Mine was a dreaded experience. I dreaded doing my hair when it was time to do my hair because it wasn't pleasant. It was, I remember letting my scalp burn because I knew my hair would be as straight as possible. My mom would be happy. And now that I think about it, I was a child. How did formulating the thought that my scalp has to be completely obliterated in order for my hair to be as straight as possible, because my hair was difficult, according to my mom at the time. Now she loves it, but at the time she said it was unmanageable, and I think Miss Danielle spoke to that and said it was a matter of convenience. So for me, it didn't feel like a beautiful experience. In fact, it felt as arduous and as annoying as it was for me. It was the same for my mother. And so oftentimes we would end up in hair salons and then they would say the same thing, "I'm tender-headed." But it wasn't that I was tender-headed, it's that they did not know how to work with natural hair. And if I wasn't at home going to a salon or having somebody manipulate my hair to look straight, then it was shaved off. So my journey was slow, but I find that creating and instilling in my daughter to love her hair in all stages is important, especially with the current. The ACLU website has a list of a whole bunch of books that are banned. And among those books that are banned are books about natural hair for Black children. a book about natural hair being on a banned book list is ridiculous to me. So it feels as though it is my job to instill in my daughter, it doesn't feel it is my job to instill in my daughter love for her hair. Because when you go around, I remember a parent was asking me, where can I go find books to read to my child? Because she's a white parent with with a biracial child. And she wanted her child to love her hair because her child wanted it straight and her hair was like mine. I said, well, there are these books you could go purchase, but a lot of them are now on the banned book list. And as we can see with this administration, there is a complete erasure happening slowly, and people are ignoring the signs. And it starts with books we read. It starts with being represented in a way that we can tell our children, hey, look, I can tell you my stories, but you can also read other people's stories. And so I've been collecting these books that are being banned, especially about Black hair, so that when they're no longer in print, my daughter can read them. And now she may not have interest in them. She may not even care about them. In fact, she thinks it's annoying I'm even suggesting it. But I know the importance of loving your hair at a young age, as somebody who didn't love it at a young age and who had to develop a love for it because of the people I was surrounded by. Like Obari said, you know, I went to a school that was very Eurocentric in Africa, you know, and even though it was a school with all Black children, everything we're taught was Eurocentric centered. And unlearning that in my 20s and in my 30s has been quite challenging. So these rituals that we do with our children, sometimes they may seem, you know, repetitive, but they're very important because they instill a sense of love and self. And I discovered that much later on in life. And I'm glad I did, because some people do not come to that realization of self-love ever. So in my opinion, I feel these rituals that I do with my daughter are both healing and affirming for my daughter and myself.
Thank you very much. Guys, I really wanted just to say that that's why we have to stand up for our young people, our children, and each time I think we feel that we've won something, we feel that something else is around the corner, right? So we just have to stay on guard and to make sure that we're there and we have a community of support. And so I think that is very important for us to have, and both for boys and for girls. I think they each have a little bit different dynamic as the gender norms would tend to dictate. However, they both need that care and support and that community of conscious, loving people. So thank you very much for sharing with me and for doing what you do, and for, hopefully we're no longer strangers, and come to Belize. We're right here. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we do have to end, but I am such gratitude for the vulnerability, that our panelists showed, and really sharing your stories, talking about your children, talking about, such intimate moments of life, and also just the authenticity, how each of you have shown up today, and the journey that we've all taken with our hair stories. So thank you so much for joining us. We will be pretending to do webinars, every month. Again, we want to make them free, accessible for everyone. We'll be doing a yoga workshop next month. We also have some other upcoming workshops that we're planning as well. Yes, I think a part 2 is needed. I think we even have to talk about, like we said, colorism and other forms of oppression when it comes to beauty standards. So we will, Henrietta, please remember, I might call on you. So you all look out for my emails and text messages. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And please keep in contact, visit the website, become our pen pals, share your ideas. And we hopefully look forward to seeing you in an upcoming webinar. Thank you.